Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we sift through information, maybe articles you've read, research papers, or even your own notes, and we pull out the most compelling ideas, the surprising details. The goal is always to help you get truly well-informed, quickly and clearly.
Right.
Today we're doing something a bit special, diving into a really fascinating case study in national reconstruction.
Yeah, it's quite something.
It's a deep dive looking at how a nation facing just immense challenges is thinking about rebuilding its vital energy infrastructure. But through a very specific lens, a reformed theological framework.
That's the key part.
So we're calling this a reformed thinking deep dive.
Yeah.
The material we're looking at offers a compelling demonstration of how strongly held convictions can shape very practical, real-world solutions.
It really does.
You're with us as we unpack this vision for Ukraine's energy future.
And it's an illuminating look, I think, at how foundational beliefs can genuinely guide engineering choices, policy discussions, and ethical thinking right in the middle of enormous challenges. What makes this source material particularly interesting is how it shows rebuilding not just as a technical job, but as something described as, well, a moral vocation.
A moral vocation. So for you, our listener, while we are focusing on Ukraine, this isn't just about one nation's story. It's about watching how a particular worldview can inform almost every decision in a huge rebuilding effort.
Right.
And does make you wonder, what might this suggest for how we approach other big societal efforts? Or even smaller projects, in our own communities?
Good question.
Okay, let's start to unpack this blueprint for renewal. To begin, let's try and get a handle on the sheer scale of the challenge in Ukraine. The source documents, they paint a really stark picture of destruction.
They do.
But then they quickly pivot, saying this isn't just a problem to fix, but is more like an urgent call to respond. The war has left Ukraine's energy and utility sector in what the sources call a fractured ruin.
A fractured ruin. That's a powerful description. And the scope of the physical devastation is truly sobering. According to the World Bank's February 2025 assessment, the RDNA4, the direct physical loss just to the energy sector, is around $20 billion.
Wow, $20 billion. That's huge.
It is, and that points to massive financial loss, but it represents so much more than just money. Think about the physical reality behind that number.
Okay.
We're talking about 18 combined heat and power plants, huge facilities described as reduced to twisted steel or just obliterated by missile and drone strikes.
It's gone.
Gone. More than 40% of high-voltage substations, the critical nodes that step down electricity for distribution, they've been gouged open, some apparently vaporized entirely.
It's hard to picture, and the material also mentions over 800 municipal boiler houses. These are the systems providing heat for whole neighborhoods, right?
That's right. And they're described as incapacitated.
Incapacitated.
And thousands of kilometers of distribution cable, the very veins and arteries of the grid, shredded. The overall picture painted is a patchwork of smoking craters, jury-rigged feeder lines, and feverish improvisation. Just trying to keep things going.
And behind these numbers, these statistics, the sources really bring out the tangible human cost. This isn't abstract damage happening somewhere else.
No, not at all. We hear about households literally boiling snow for tea just to survive, or surgeons illuminating operating tables with battery torches during critical procedures.
You know what I imagine.
Farmers watching their milk spoil because there's no refrigeration, pediatric wards glowing by the blue light of battery torches, water utilities forced to ration pressure just to keep their pumps from tripping.
And it's widespread, isn't it? Not just isolated incidents.
No, the sources talk about rolling outages stretching 8 hours a day in places like Kharkiv and Chernihiv, families forced to burn scrap wood in old Soviet-era stoves just to stay warm.
It's just a vivid illustration of how the collapse of basic infrastructure unravels daily life for millions of people.
It really is.
Okay, so this is where it gets particularly interesting, I think. The sources make it very clear that this reconstruction effort, it's not just a technical challenge of wires and generators.
Right.
Instead, it's described, as you said, as a moral vocation. So what does that actually mean to approach such a huge rebuilding effort from this specific perspective?
Well, if we look at the bigger picture presented, this idea suggests the rebuilding effort. Conceptually, it begins and ends with God. It views the shattered utilities not in isolation, but as part of creation. And a creation that, from this reformed view, God sustains and intends to renew.
Okay.
So this framework, it aims to ensure that the engineering plans stay aligned with that broader purpose. So the rebuilding itself becomes what's called an enacted confession of faith.
An enacted confession of faith.
Yeah. This foundational understanding, it shifts the entire perspective on reconstruction. It moves it beyond just engineering to something carrying real ethical and spiritual weight.
So the sources then outline three sort of intertwined convictions that frame this whole task from that reform standpoint. First, there's the cultural mandate. This concept calls humanity to cultivate and safeguard creation, exercising wise dominion even in the rubble of war. It's rooted in Genesis 1.28 in Psalm 8.
Right, the idea of stewardship.
It's seen as a call to bring forth creation's latent potential. So it's not just about fixing what's broken, it seems, but seeing the devastation as a chance to build something even better, something infused with intentional purpose.
That's a significant shift from just recovery. It's about promoting genuine flourishing.
Okay, and the second conviction.
The second one is love of neighbor. This principle sets out an obligation for everyone, including civil rulers, to pursue practical acts of mercy that preserve life and promote general well-being.
Okay, based on Matthew 22, Romans 13.
That's right. And this extends to ensuring basic utilities for everybody. What this means in practice, according to the sources, is that every kilowatt restored, every water pipe fixed, every heating system brought back online. It's viewed as an act of concrete care for those around us.
Especially the most vulnerable.
Especially the most vulnerable, like the elderly mentioned shivering in Michael Live. It's a very practical expression of compassion.
And the third conviction.
The third is divine providence. This idea holds that all human labor, even in a crisis like this, unfolds under God's sovereign care. The same God who, as Hebrews 1.3 puts it, upholds all things by the word of his ability, also provides the resources needed for a struggling nation's sustenance.
So that includes the engineers, the policymakers, the donors?
Precisely. The skilled engineers, the prudent policymakers, the generous donors, they're all seen as part of God's provision. And this perspective helps, the sources argue, in curbing both despair, because God is still in control and presumption, reminding us that true success comes through his blessing.
Right. It's not all down to human effort alone.
Not at all. The Westminster Confession v.1 describes God's governance as most wise and most holy, underlining that human expertise works with divine intent, not trying to replace it.
Okay, so those are the three main convictions.
Building on those, the sources then detail 5 interlocking biblical categories. These really serve as the compass for every decision in this reconstruction effort.
A compass for decisions. Okay, what's the first one?
The first is divine sovereignty and providence, which we just touched on. It affirms that God works all things according to the counsel of his will, as Ephesians 1.11 says, even amidst the chaos of war.
So from this viewpoint, a destroyed transformer and one still standing are both somehow.
Both are understood to be within the Father's hand. That's the language used. This theological lens helps counter despair. God remains in control, and presumption remembering ultimate success comes from his blessing.
Right, and you mentioned the Westminster Confession again here.
Yes, v.1 describing God's governance as most wise and most holy, underscoring that human expertise operates within, not instead of divine decree.
Okay, category number 2.
Second is the cultural mandate and stewardship. This comes from Genesis 1.28 and Psalm 8 again, referring to humanity's original task to fill the earth and subdue it, but exercising dominion as responsible stewardship, not exploitation.
So resources like electricity, water, they're seen as gifts.
Gifts, yes. Gifts to be cultivated for the common good. Rebuilding then becomes a sort of reenactment of Edenic gardening.
Edenic gardening.
Yeah, carefully pruning the wreckage, reseeding the grid with renewables, training apprentices, so future generations inherit a better and more sustainable system than the one that was damaged.
So it's proactive, purposeful improvement, not just repair.
That's the idea.
Okay, third category.
Third is love of neighbor and mercy. This principle, from Matthew 22 and the Good Samaritan parable, connects love of God with the duty to care for others.
Right.
Reliable utilities, from this viewpoint, perform what the sources call a Samaritan function at societal scale.
Interesting phrase.
They enable essential services, ventilators, safe sewage removal, resuming livelihoods. The sources state every kilowatt restored is neighbor love quantified.
Neighbor love quantified.
Yeah, highlighting the need to support the well-being of vulnerable people, like those elderly folks in Michael Live in winter.
Okay, makes sense. Fourth category.
Fourth is civil magistrate and sphere sovereignty. While Christ's lordship is seen as over everything, this framework identifies distinct spheres of authority.
Okay.
Romans 13 portrays the civil ruler as God's servant for your good, responsible for things like setting safety codes, allocating tariffs for utilities, defending critical infrastructure like substations.
So the state has its role, the church has its role.
Exactly. The sources clarify a church might put solar panels on its roof, but it doesn't take over the state's legal responsibilities. This encourages cooperation without confusing the roles. Clear boundaries.
So energy ministers draft contracts, church ministers preach against corruption, but not the other way around.
That's the example given, yes. Each sphere operates within its proper domain, promoting harmony.
Okay. And the fifth and final category.
Finally, number 5 is the ethics of reconstruction, guided by the moral law. Even in a war economy where things can get murky, Scripture provides moral constants. Like transparent scales from Proverbs 11.1, truthful testimony from Exodus 20.16, and the principle of Sabbath rest from Exodus 20.811.
And how do these translate into practice in this context?
They translate into very concrete measures. For instance, anti-corruption portals publishing tender results in real time, blockchain meters to deter electricity theft, contractual clauses limiting Sunday construction to emergencies only.
And what about the workers themselves?
The sources note that workers rebuilding high-voltage lines should be treated with respect, not driven relentlessly like Pharaoh's brickmakers, ensuring they get proper rest and fair conditions. Rebuilding with these ethical considerations, it's argued, not only meets donor requirements, but also bears witness to the holiness of God.
Okay, so those 5 categories provide the ethical and theological compass for the whole effort.
That's the framework presented, yes.
So with those foundational ideas in place, how does this grand vision actually start to take shape on the ground? The first phase is described pretty vividly as trauma surgery for the grid.
Yeah, trauma surgery is a good way to put it.
So what does that look like in practice, especially in that crucial first year after the immediate devastation?
This immediate stabilization phase, the first 0 to 12 months, it really is like a national triage ward for the energy sector. The main strategic goal is to transform the damaged, often fragmented grid into a minimum viable, winter-proof backbone.
Minimum viable.
Yeah, capable of continuously supplying electricity, clean water, and heat to 3 top priority groups: hospitals, water treatment plants, and densely populated urban areas.
Okay, the essentials first.
Absolutely. And at the same time, this phase involves laying the moral and administrative groundwork needed for a reconstruction free from corruption. It's about urgently restoring those basic structures people need for survival and dignity.
And with resources being so scarce, how do they decide where to focus first?
Well, the scarce resources are directed initially to what are called triage nodes.
Triage node.
These are critical points whose failure would cascade into wider humanitarian disasters. The sources specifically mentioned 30 transmission substations as these nodes.
30 specific ones? Why those?
Because their collapse could bring down entire oblasts, administrative regions. So these critical substations get immediate fortification, things like improvised blast walls and mobile foam fire suppression units built at breakneck pace.
Using designs tested elsewhere.
Yes, designs informed by strategies field-tested in places like Israel and South Korea, countries with experience protecting critical infrastructure. It's an urgent, targeted effort to stop a total system collapse.
Okay, so physical hardening is key. What about other technical strategies during this urgent phase?
Cybersecurity is a huge concern, right alongside the physical. Tamper-resistant SCADA firmware, the control systems for these industrial processes, are deployed quickly to seal off vulnerable data pathways.
Because a cyber attack could undo the physical work.
Precisely. The sources say a single logic bomb can nullify metric tons of poured concrete. Protecting the digital is just as critical as the physical.
And boosting power generation quickly.
Yes. 20 mobile, 35-megawatt containerized gas turbines, basically power plants on wheels provided under U.S. Lend-Lease, are brought in for rapid deployment.
Okay.
Plus, lithium iron phosphate battery packs are distributed. These units go strategically to life and death endpoints, surgical theaters, neonatal wards, water treatment inlets, cell tower clusters, ensuring localized power even if the main grid flickers.
And to get all this vital equipment in quickly, the sources mention some kind of legislative action.
Yes, that was crucial. On day 60, the Verkhovna Rada, Ukraine's parliament, passed a 60-day Green Corridor decree.
Great corridor.
This exempted critical infrastructure imports from duties and streamlined customs inspections down to just 48 hours. Its stated purpose was to avert logistical bottlenecks that could hold up essential gear.
Makes sense. And at the same time, local utilities were doing something.
Yes, municipal utilities started creating localized microgrid islands around hospitals and water plants. These used rooftop solar arrays, typically 20 kilowatts, and bidirectional inverters.
So they could operate independently.
Exactly. This setup lets these critical facilities island disconnect from the national grid in milliseconds and operate autonomously during nationwide blackouts. They shed local loads gracefully instead of just failing catastrophically. It's about building distributed resilience right from the start.
And what about fuel for these generators and backup systems?
By day 90, an emergency fuel corridor was up and running. It's described as a rail pipe truck hybrid system,
Okay.
stretching from Poland to Kyiv and then on to Kharkiv. It ensures a rolling stockpile of diesel and Jet A for the mobile generators, providing 84 hours of diesel autonomy for those microgrid islands.
So even with wider grid problems, critical points stay powered.
That's the goal, guaranteeing supply to those life and death endpoints to prevent humanitarian crises.
It sounds like alongside all this technical work, there was a parallel effort to build what the sources call moral architecture. What did that look like?
Yes, the moral architecture. This is where the church's diaconal structures, their mercy ministries, really came to the fore. Congregations in every oblast were challenged to open 500 warming and charging centers.
500. Wow. What did they offer?
They provided thermal shelter, soup kitchens, USB charging points, very practical needs, and also chaplaincy for the line workers coming back from long, hard shifts on frozen pylons.
So practical help and spiritual support.
Yes, and this initiative is portrayed as echoing historical examples like the granaries of Joseph or the deacon-managed food banks in Acts 6. It highlights a long tradition of practical mercy.
And there's also focus on worker well-being, which seems quite remarkable in such a crisis situation.
It is quite striking. To prevent the Sabbath, the day of rest, from being completely consumed by the crisis tempo, utility schedules were reorganized. Emergency callouts were rotated to make sure every employee got at least one uninterrupted 24-hour rest period each week. And this was explicitly done in obedience to the fourth commandment from Exodus 20.
So a conscious decision based on a theological principle.
Yes, recognizing both the dignity of labor and the basic human need for rest, even in an emergency.
How is financial integrity maintained during such a rapid, large-scale effort? That seems like a huge challenge.
A huge challenge. Financial transparency was rigorously enforced through a public ledger procurement dashboard.
A public ledger.
Yes. This platform published every contract and change order above 1 million, that's the Ukrainian hryvnia, in real time. This invited scrutiny from civil society auditors and local church elders, aiming to ensure honest weights and measures, drawing from Proverbs 11.
And deterring theft.
To deter diesel theft, which was apparently a chronic wartime issue, they introduced blockchain-tagged fuel coupons. And chaplains also reminded people that the ninth commandment forbids all false stealing, reinforcing ethical conduct from a spiritual angle.
Okay, so multiple layers of accountability. How was progress actually tracked and evaluated in this initial intense phase?
Evaluation was key. They conducted covenantal stewardship audits at the 3, 6, and 12-month marks.
Covenantal stewardship audits, what did those involve?
These were joint efforts, the energy ministry, reformed seminaries, and engineering faculties working together, described interestingly as brief liturgies of data and doxology.
Liturgies of data and doxology.
Yeah. Tables detailing megawatt hours restored, outage minutes reduced, and lives preserved were apparently read aloud alongside psalms of thanksgiving, reinforcing the idea that, from this viewpoint, God's glory guides not just sermons, but spreadsheets too.
And what was the specific goal by the end of that first year?
The goal was quite specific. At least 95% of Ukrainians should enjoy a reliable 20-hour-per-day electricity supply. Every hospital should draw from dual redundant feeders plus on-site storage. And no war widow should spend a single night of January without heated shelter. That paints a very clear picture of the measurable, practical outcomes they were aiming for.
Okay, so once the immediate crisis, the trauma surgery, is addressed, The plan moves into a more deliberate phase. This is like into physical therapy for the grid.
Right, physical therapy, it implies something slower, more intentional.
And not just restoration, but building something better than what was there before. This is the midterm resilient reconstruction phase, covering years 1 to 5. What's the guiding conviction here?
The guiding conviction for this phase is that resilience isn't a luxury. It's an ethical responsibility that stems from that cultural mandate we discussed earlier.
The call to cultivate and guard the garden.
Precisely, so that future generations may flourish. It's about building something durable and future-ready, not just patching up the past.
And what's the first major component of this physical therapy?
The first major strand is decentralized generation. The goal by the end of year 2 is for every oblast capital, every regional capital, to host at least one municipally owned microgrid.
Municipally owned.
Yes. And these microgrids are designed to be anchored in local resources. Rooftop solar, on-site battery storage, and where it makes sense, small-scale wind turbines.
And how do these operate day to day?
They operate in what's called plug-and-play mode. When the main national grid is up and running, they export any surplus electricity they generate to the wholesale market.
Okay.
But if a missile strike or something else cuts the national connection, they can island in milliseconds. They instantly disconnect and keep providing local power to critical services, shutting non-essential loads gracefully instead of just collapsing.
That sounds like a really significant shift in how the energy system is structured. What about the regulations needed to support this?
Well, legislation passed back in January 2025 apparently already reduced the time it takes to connect these distributed generation projects. The next step planned is net billing reform.
Net billing, what does that do?
This rewards households and churches for exporting clean electricity back to the grid when demand is high. And at the same time, it helps discourage phantom feed-in scams, ensuring fair payment. This policy, the sources say, upholds that biblical principle of honest weights and measures.
Okay. And alongside solar?
In parallel with the solar initiatives, the government is also finalizing plans to rehabilitate the Dnipro hydro cascade, the big hydroelectric dams.
Rehabilitate them how?
By installing modern, fish-friendly Kaplan turbines and digital governors. This lets Ukraine's oldest renewable energy asset effectively balance out the variable output from all the new solar power.
And a very ambitious part of this midterm plan seems to be a nuclear renaissance. What's involved there?
Yes, running alongside the renewables is this nuclear renaissance. In July 2025, Energoatom, the state nuclear operator, signed a framework agreement with Holtec to manufacture SMR-160 modules domestically.
SMR's small modular reactors.
That's right. Smaller, factory-built reactors designed for flexibility and quicker deployment. Between years 2 and 5, the plan is to retrofit the Mykolaiv shipyard into a pressure vessel forge and start construction on the first reactor building at the Chehirin brownfield site.
That sounds like a very fast pace.
It's described as aggressive, yes, but the sources frame it as a prudential path of energy independence to avoid debtor bondage, referencing Proverbs 22.7 again. It's also seen as aligning with creation care by significantly cutting life cycle carbon emissions.
And how is oversight managed for something like new nuclear?
To maintain oversight, ensure safety, and responsible stewardship, there's a multi-stakeholder board. It includes civil engineers, reformed ethicists, international watchdogs. They conduct quarterly open hearings. This setup is presented as echoing the gate elders of Deuteronomy, who judged impartially in public.
It's clear that all this new hardware, solar, hydro, nuclear, won't work effectively if the electricity can't move freely and securely. So what's happening on the digitalization front?
Good point. A third key strand is grid digitalization. Years 1 through 3 focus on rolling out tamper-resistant SCADA firmware across all the main 330 kilovolt substations.
Okay.
This is paired with blockchain-anchored smart metering for 10 million retail customers.
Blockchain metering, what's the benefit?
This technology provides immutable provenance for every kilowatt hour. It means its origin and path are recorded and verifiable. This deters theft rings and enables time-of-use pricing, where electricity costs vary based on demand.
What about data privacy concerns?
Data privacy is protected by default end-to-end encryption and a legal opt-out right. This is explicitly linked to the 9th commandment, forbidding any distortion or unnecessary disclosure of truth.
And using technology to predict problems.
Yes, utilities are adopting predictive maintenance analytics, using drones and AI to flag things like conductor hotspots before they cause blackouts, improving grid reliability proactively.
Beyond the technology and the infrastructure, what about the people? the human element in this huge rebuilding effort.
Crucial. All the while, the human element, the people who will actually operate and maintain this new grid, are being developed too. 3 regional energy vocational academies are set up in Lviv, Dnipro, and Odessa.
Okay.
They're partnering with reform seminaries to offer a dual curriculum.
Dual curriculum.
Yes. Practical technical skills, high voltage line work, inverter programming, SMR maintenance alongside theology of vocation, Sabbath economics, anti-corruption ethics.
So training technicians and stewards at the same time.
That's the idea. Veterans and displaced engineers graduate not just as technicians, but as stewards who work heartily as for the Lord. Women, often marginalized in these trades, are actively recruited through scholarship quotas.
How does that fit with complementarian views mentioned earlier?
The sources say this approach respects complementarian views on distinct roles in the church while affirming women's equal value and contribution in civil society and the marketplace.
And addressing burnout.
To address potential burnout, utilities implement a 3-2-1 rota. 3 weeks working, 2 mixed remote field, 1 paid sabbatical per quarter, designed to incarnate the rhythm of labor and rest believed to be embedded in creation.
How is such a large-scale initiative being financed, especially during this recovery period?
Financing underpins everything. The blended capital model, which started in year 1, expands significantly now. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development issues $1 billion in resilience bonds.
Oh.
The Ukrainian diaspora raises another $250 million annually through those church-coordinated Lights for Life war bonds we mentioned, with Psalm 46 printed on them.
Right.
Private investors also join through legally capped public-private partnerships structured to prevent any single company remonopolizing the grid, ensuring diverse ownership.
And transparency remains key.
Absolutely. A centralized public procurement ledger, audited by external firms and reviewed periodically by presbyteries, those church governing bodies, publishes cash flows in real time. This transparency is seen as essential for credibility.
And what are the expected measurable results by the end of this 5-year phase?
By the close of year 5, the sources project 3 clear targets. First, 1 gigawatt of rooftop and utility-scale solar capacity operational.
1 gigawatt solar.
Second, 60% of pre-war coal capacity retired without any capacity shortfall. A clear shift to cleaner energy.
Okay.
And third, nationwide outage minutes per customer reduced by 80% compared to 2023 levels. A significantly more reliable grid.
And these aren't just technical numbers in this view.
No, the sources suggest each achievement is seen as a doxological footnote, meaning these lights illuminate classrooms where scripture is studied, ventilators hum in hospitals, street lamps deter violence. Every practical success is viewed as a way to give glory to God, turning data into an act of worship.
Okay, looking beyond the immediate stabilization and the midterm resilience building, the vision for Ukraine's energy future extends further. It goes into what the sources call shalom-infused innovation.
Shalom-infused innovation.
Yes, aiming to make the nation a model of energy stewardship for others. What does this long-term landscape look like, starting from year 5 and going forward?
This long-term transformation, starting around year 5, adopts what's termed an eschatological posture.
Eschatological posture.
Meaning, it means recognizing that while the final fulfillment of all things is future, we're still called now to guide creation toward its creational telos, its created purpose. So Ukraine's energy future is seen not as just catching up with modernity, but as a vocation of shalom-infused innovation, striving for peace, wholeness, completeness in all aspects of energy.
And what's the key technical breakthrough that enables this long-term vision?
The technical keystone here is the commissioning of that first SMR 160 module at Kyiv, scheduled for 2029, which is year 5 on the roadmap.
The small modular reactor.
Right. That 160 megawatts of zero-carbon baseload power finally displaces the last coal peaker plant in the Donbas region. And crucially, it supplies the anchor load for a new trilateral high-voltage interconnector linking Kyiv, Warsaw, and Berlin.
So Ukraine becomes an energy exporter, a hub.
That's the plan. Combined with 5 gigawatts of distributed solar, the rehabilitated Dnipro hydro dams, and 1.5 gigawatts of onshore wind, Ukraine is projected to shift from energy importer to a net exporter of clean electrons.
And what's the economic impact of becoming an exporter?
The sources project earnings of $2 billion annually in cross-border capacitor revenues from these exports.
Okay.
And these revenues are constitutionally earmarked for regional hospital endowments and orphan care grants. A very tangible application of the diaconal principle that surplus should flow to the weakest members of the covenant community, echoing Acts 11.
So directly linking economic success to practical mercy.
That's the structure.
Now, behind all this physical infrastructure, there's mention of an ecosystem of covenantal governance. How does that function long-term?
Right, the covenantal governance. Every 5 years, the Energy Ministry convenes a public stewardship convocation.
A stewardship convocation.
At this gathering, engineers, presbyters, citizen auditors review detailed performance indicators, things like megawatt hours exported, outage minutes per capita, tons of co-euro abated. These are read aloud like liturgical antiphons. This is followed by communal prayer, psalm singing, and then open microphone repentance for any corruption uncovered during the previous audit cycle.
Open mic repentance.
Yeah. This ritualized accountability is presented as embodying the Westminster Confession's view that the moral law restrains sin and promotes the common good.
Economically, the long-term plan also includes something called Jubilee-shaped diversification. What does that mean?
Economically, it draws on principles related to the biblical Jubilee year, aiming for diversification. A sovereign green future fund, capitalized by 10% of those energy export revenues, is overseen by a board, including theologians and macroeconomists.
Okay. What does the fund do?
It underwrites venture accelerators in cities like Lviv and Kharkiv. Startups get patient equity long-term, supportive investment for projects like Second Life battery recycling, agrivoltaics.
Agrivoltaics, it's solar panels over crops.
Yeah, solar panels designed to shade crops like sunflowers, allowing both energy production and agriculture. Also, anaerobic digesters converting dairy waste into pipeline-grade biomethane.
And what about the intellectual property created by these innovations?
There are intellectual property covenants in place. They require patents from fund grants to enter the public domain after 15 years. This reflects the biblical idea that land and by extension knowledge ultimately belongs to the Lord, citing Leviticus 25.
And preventing resource exploitation.
The sources also mention that while international investors are welcome, equity caps and mandatory technology transfer clauses prevent a reprise of the 1990s resource plunder, condemned in Isaiah 5, aiming to ensure Ukraine retains control and benefits.
Technologically, the digitalization that started earlier is supposed to mature into real-time covenantal visibility. How does that work?
Yeah, real-time covenantal visibility. Every substation, for example, posts its efficiency score, outage history, carbon intensity data on an open API, a public programming interface.
So anyone can access the data.
Churches, civic coders, yes. They can develop dashboards for parish hall monitors, making complex energy data accessible locally. What's more, when a feeder trips or a transformer overheats, SMS alerts go not just to the utility dispatch, but also to the deacons running neighborhood warming shelters.
Enabling faster response for aid.
Precisely. Enabling rapid mercy mobilization that dignifies recipients rather than relegating them to anonymous queues. A clear fusion of electrons and ethics, as the source puts it.
And how does this long-term transition affect social aspects, like vocational development?
Socially, the energy transition becomes a vehicle for vocational discipleship. By year 7, those energy vocational academies spin off guild-style fellowships.
Guilds?
Yeah, where master electricians catechize apprentices in both safe wiring practices and the 10 Commandments, showing work excellence and personal conduct aren't separate.
And the role of women.
Views on distinct roles are acknowledged, as mentioned, without limiting female talent. Women make up 40% of certified solar installers and lead the National Power Systems Cybersecurity Lab. Work-family rhythms stabilize around a 6-hour shift model, leaving margin for evening worship and catechesis, echoing an older ideal where labor supports, not overwhelms, rest.
Finally, what about the ecological side of this long-term vision?
Ecologically, the program aims for a unique form of creation care. Wetlands drained for old Soviet coal mines are restored as carbon sinks and bird sanctuaries. Decommissioned slag heaps from industry are repurposed for terraced solar gardens.
Solar gardens on slag heaps.
Yes, and these gardens are described as being crowned with wooden chapels whose stained glass panels depict Revelation 22's river of life flowing through photovoltaic vineyards, a very artistic linking of technology and spiritual imagery.
And by year 10, what are the broad anticipated outcomes of this entire vision?
By year 10, the outcomes are quite specific. Outage minutes projected to fall below Germany's, a highly reliable grid. Household energy poverty drops by 2/3, a major social impact. And Ukraine is expected to export not only electrons, but a reformed paradigm of energy stewardship.
A paradigm of stewardship.
One that wields robust engineering, transparent institutions, and the hopeful realism that marks a people who await a city whose designer and builder is God, citing Hebrews 11.10. So the long-term transformation aims to be more than just completing a project. It envisions a nation where practical success is understood as expressing a larger purpose. Which brings us to a really crucial aspect. How is such a massive project spanning years and billions of euros actually financed? The sources lay out a comprehensive strategy, not just for funding, but for doing it ethically, ensuring accountability and tackling corruption head-on.
Right, the money side.
The sources highlight that, from this theological viewpoint, money isn't just a neutral tool, it's framed as a covenantal test of the heart. For Ukraine, the stakes are really high because the war exposed those decades-old patronage networks that used to siphon off utility tariffs into private hands.
So tackling corruption is fundamental to the grid's health.
Absolutely. The long-term health of the grid depends on this dual approach. A blended capital strategy, bringing in different types of funding, combined with a covenantal governance architecture designed specifically to resist graft. Every hryvnia is meant to operate with integrity.
Okay, so let's break down this blended capital stack, this pooling of different funding sources.
Well, the initial funding includes a 1 billion power resilience bond issued by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD. This helps manage refinancing risk for those early microgrid pilot projects.
Okay, it's one layer.
A second layer is green sovereign bonds. These are 10-year notes where the coupon payments are actually linked to verified reductions in emissions.
So performance linked.
Yes. Designed to attract investment from, say, Nordic pension funds interested in ESG factors, environmental, social governance, channeling that capital into things like rooftop solar deployment.
And there's a distinct program involving the Ukrainian diaspora community.
Yes, the Diaspora War Bond Program. It's administered by the National Bank of Ukraine, but marketed through Ukrainian Baptist and Reformed congregations abroad. The goal is to raise a steady $250 million a year at concessional rates lower interest than commercial loans.
And each certificate has Psalm 46 printed on it.
Yes, in both English and Ukrainian, offering that spiritual reassurance. God is our refuge and strength.
And the Green Future Fund.
Finally, starting in year 6, 10% of the net export revenues from that Kyiv-Warsaw-Berlin interconnector flows into the Sovereign Green Future Fund. Its charter mandates the capital gains support hospital endowments and orphan care grants, literally converting electrons into mercy ministry, using an analogy to Acts 11.29.
Now, getting all this capital is one thing, but the sources also raise a concern, quoting Proverbs 22.7, that the borrower is slave to the lender. How do they plan to avoid what's called neo-colonial bondage?
That's a major concern addressed in the plan. To mitigate the risk of too much debt, the Verkhovna Rada enacts a debt safeguard statute.
What does that statute do?
It caps public sector debt service specifically for these energy projects at 40% of the annual sector cash flow. If that limit is breached, it triggers a mandatory 5-year moratorium on taking on new external borrowing. It's a built-in break.
A break on debt. And there's also that unique Jubilee clause in the bond agreements.
Yes, the Jubilee clause. It's a crucial provision included in every bond indenture of the legal contract. If Ukraine's overall debt-to-GDP ratio goes above 90%, the lenders automatically extend the loan maturities by 5 years at the existing interest rate.
So a kind of automatic debt relief mechanism.
Essentially, yes. It's described as echoing the land reversion logic of Leviticus 25, where land went back to original owners in the Jubilee year. It provides debt relief without triggering credit defaults, aiming for long-term financial stability and preventing a debt spiral.
The governance model for these projects follows that reformed principle of sphere sovereignty, meaning responsibilities should devolve to the smallest competent unit. How does that work in practice here?
Well, for example, municipal cooperatives are required to own at least 51% of the microgrid assets. This ensures local control and benefit.
Okay.
Regional pension funds can invest up to 30%, keeping more financial interests local. The national government keeps only a golden share, giving it veto rights just on national security grounds, limiting central interference.
And the role of clergy on the boards.
Crucially, each co-op board reserves 2 seats for clergy-nominated elders. The purpose isn't church control, but to provide a moral plumb line, referencing the Heidelberg Catechism on Honest Commerce. They're there to help ensure ethical conduct.
And employee ownership.
Yes, mandatory employee stock ownership plans are stipulated for utility staff, so linemen and control room techs have a literal stake in the grid's performance and success.
How is transparency and procurement maintained, and what about audits?
To maintain transparency, every contract over 1 million appears in real time on that public procurement ledger, the blockchain-backed portal viewable on smartphones. Very accessible.
Okay.
Change orders modifications to contracts are capped at 10%. Anything over that goes to a live-streamed public hearing, another layer of accountability.
And the audits.
Quarterly covenantal stewardship audits are jointly chaired by the Energy Regulator, a major international accounting firm, and the General Assembly of the Reformed Church. They scrutinize cash flows, carbon metrics, even Sabbath compliance of worker rotas.
And they start with psalm singing.
Sessions begin with psalm singing and end with that open mic confession of any misallocation uncovered, reinforcing that refreshing comes from repentance. Plus, whistleblower hotlines staffed by deaconesses guarantee anonymity with protections against false accusations based on Deuteronomy 19.
What about regulatory harmonization and the rule of law within this framework?
Regulatory harmonization is a big focus. Ukraine adopts clean energy grid codes aligned with EU standards, and these embed explicit anti-bribery articles right into the regulations.
Teeth.
Yes. Infractions over €50,000 trigger automatic referral to the National Anti-Corruption Bureau and potential disbarment from future bids. Strict consequences. Judges in corruption courts get continuing education co-taught by law professors, and reformed ethicists on Romans 13's call for magistrates to be a terror to bad conduct, linking law and ethics.
And finally, how is financial literacy promoted, both for the public and future leaders?
Finally, money isn't just managed, it's discipled, guided by principle. Local parishes host 6-week financial literacy courses covering budgeting, understanding utility bills, and spotting predatory loan schemes. Utility invoices even come with QR codes linking to these resources. And seminary curricula require future pastors to take a module in basic project finance math so they can guide their congregations through things like bond purchases or PPP proposals knowledgeably. The sources suggest this all creates a beneficial feedback loop. Capital, guided by transparent law, enables infrastructure that serves neighbor love, which yields social stability, benefiting investors with steady yields. It demonstrates Proverbs 11.25, whoever waters will himself be watered.
What's really noticeable throughout this whole plan is the explicit and active role of the church. It's described not just as providing chaplains on the side, but as functioning like oxygen through distinct capacities. It goes well beyond simple charity.
Yes, the sources state that among all the stakeholders involved, only the church carries a charter that predates and outlives them all. And from this perspective, it alone has both the moral vocabulary to name corruption as sin and the eschatological horizon to persevere when budgets get tight or media attention fades.
And this contribution shows up in 4 vital capacities.
4 vital capacities, yes. Though distinct, they're presented as pulsing together, like a single lifeblood of witness. First is the prophetic task.
Okay, what does that involve?
Pulpits and synods, church councils translate the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, into regulatory critique.
So, speaking truth to structures.
Essentially, challenging things like unjust tariffs that crush widows, 12-hour Sabbath shifts that erode rest, and opaque procurement practices. This balances respect for lawful authority, Romans 13, with rebuking those who court oligarchs, keeping the church from being tied to political factions or staying silent on injustice.
Okay, that's the prophetic task.
Second is diaconal mercy. Act 6 shows practical relief as a church duty, so every parish hall is envisioned as a micro-relief hub.
Micro-relief hub.
Deacons those church officers for mercy ministries, audit utility bills for single mothers, stock closets with LED bulbs and insulating window film, run energy poverty clinics where people learn about solar grants that could cut their winter bills.
Very practical help.
Very practical. Rural pastors drive vans delivering containerized battery packs and trauma-informed counselors to frontline villages, singing psalms while line workers splice cables nearby. Overseas partners send tools but not control. Echoing Paul's collection for Jerusalem, respecting dignity, avoiding paternalism.
Their capacity.
Third is vocational discipleship. The sources note historical figures like Calvin integrated theology with various trades. Similarly, seminaries partner with the energy vocational academies. Morning devotions exegete both Proverbs, Surpetry, and Ohm's Law, connecting faith and engineering. Older master electricians catechize apprentices not just in transformer safety, but also the Heidelberg Catechism on the Communion of Saints, seeing sharing tools as an ordinary act of fellowship.
And affirming gifts.
Yes, affirming gifts. Views on distinct roles are acknowledged, as we said, but women's talents in cybersecurity or solar installation are affirmed, leading everyone to see work excellence as a form of worship. Finance majors join a Steward Scholar cohort reading finance cases alongside the Westminster Confession, preparing them for audit committees with spreadsheets in one hand and scripture in the other.
And the fourth capacity.
Fourth is apologetic beauty. In a secularizing Europe, the idea that electrons can bear witness might seem odd, but Belgic Confession Article 2 speaks of creation as a most elegant book.
So finding beauty and meaning in the reconstruction.
Yes, churches host energy and eschatology forums, integrating grid diagrams with Revelation 21. Stained glass windows in repurposed substations show the river of life flowing through turbines. Advent candles are lit from rooftop solar, dramatizing John 1.5 whenever city street lamps flicker alive after curfew, connecting spiritual light and physical light. Public credibility, the sources argue, is tied to doctrinal clarity.
And these four capacities come together in a specific ritual.
Yes, they converge each December 21st, the longest night, during the annual Covenant of Light ritual.
Tells us about that.
It takes place under leaking roofs of a half-repaired substation. Linemen, orphans, widows, CEOs, bishops, cabinet ministers all assemble. A single solar-powered lantern pierces the dark. Psalm 27 is sung in a minor key, reflecting the war's reality.
Then what happens?
Then, grid performance charts are acknowledged openly, followed by pledges to fix outages, pay living wages, honor Sabbath rest. Finally, a circuit breaker is thrown, lights come on, the psalm shifts to a major key, and elders pronounce the blessing from number 6 over everyone.
Wow.
This ritual stitches data to doxology, visually showing that megawatt hours can indeed proclaim the glory of God.
So by integrating these roles, prophetic voice, practical mercies, skills development, finding beauty, the Ukrainian church is presented as more than just a beneficiary of the rebuilt infrastructure.
Yes, it's portrayed as becoming its spiritual backbone. In the words of the Westminster Directory for Public Worship, it lights a candle that all may see the way.
And in that light.
In that light, widows read scripture, technicians rest on the Lord's day, and a nation learns again to measure prosperity not just by kilowatt surpluses, but by the radiance of the gospel reflected in every panel, turbine, and LED.
What really emerges for me from this deep dive is how comprehensively this reformed approach tries to integrate every single aspect of life, from the engineering, the finance, the social well-being, all under a guiding theological perspective.
It's quite thorough.
It's about rebuilding not just the wires and the power plants, but really a society where practical excellence and ethical conduct are seen as expressions of faith.
It's a striking illustration, I think, of how principles like stewardship and care for one's neighbor can genuinely drive concrete actions, and how accountability isn't just seen as a regulatory thing, but as a spiritual discipline.
Right.
The goal is certainly a more resilient and flourishing nation, for sure, but it seems to aim even beyond that to offer a witness to the world of how a specific worldview can shape recovery.
So for you, our listener, maybe consider this. If such a detailed and ambitious plan for national reconstruction could be so thoroughly shaped by these principles, where might similar guiding convictions apply in other areas, other societal challenges, or even just in the daily activities of our own vocations?
Yeah, what structures might we build or rebuild if we approached them with that kind of comprehensive, thoughtful intentionality?
That concludes this deep dive into Ukraine's energy renewal and its unique theological framework. We hope it sparks some new lines of thought for you. Until next time, keep seeking those illuminating insights.